Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this one, we're gonna be building a recipes app and it's gonna be full of features. Starting by sorting by newest, oldest, time to cook, name. We're gonna have searching with animations on it. Then we can add a new recipe. And of course, we can delete something and we can have a nice animation. Hey guys, don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe animation for it. Without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, on my GitHub, you can have a Vite template that you can install and clone. What it has is the following. So we have React, React DOM, Tailwind, and some of its dependencies, CLSX, CVA, ShadCN components, TypeScript Vite, PostCSS, and everything that we need to get started, plus all the config files needed. So I'm not gonna go through them because, yeah, it's beside the point. Let's start off by installing a React query so we can have our fetching library. Now that we have this installed, we just need query. So this is the right package to add. Once that we have this, we are good to go. So let's dive right into this and let's build our first mutation, our first query. Let's remove all this stuff because we don't need them for now. So now let's say query equals use, and then the query key is gonna be recipes, and then the query function is gonna be something like this, but not quite. In Vite, if you want to set an environment variable, then you need to create the env file. Then in here, we're going to add the API URL. And then if we want to have autocomplete and type safety on the Vite side, then we will need to modify here the env.d.ts file, and we need to add it as such. And now we can do this import .meta.env.vite API URL, and from here. And we are getting back the response.json, and now inside this we get our data. And if everything worked fine, then inside our app and now in the console, we would need to get, if we start it, the server. And now we already have our objects and our recipes. Perfect. Now on Google Fonts, I found a font that is quite nice, or at least I found it quite nice for this stuff, and it's called Playfair. Exactly this one. And we're gonna need the regular 400, we're gonna need the 500, and we're gonna want the bold as well. We're gonna use it as an import, and we just need to import this font here in index.css, and it should come above everything else. And then in the root we need to say serif, and we're gonna put this font. Now in our Tailwind config file, let's extend the font, and almost right, it's a serif font and it's serif. And let's do like this. And now if we want to add something here, like an h1 with a class name of text 6xl, and we call it recipes, and we give it a font serif, then we will have our font. Now in this part, we're gonna add a display of flex, we're gonna align the items on the center, and we're gonna give it a padding top and bottom of 16. So our title is nice and in the middle. And let's make this one a bit bigger, and let's also make the font maybe semi-bold. Yeah, let's leave the font how it is. Yeah, perfect. Now we actually want to display our data. Now that we have our data available and we know that our API is working, we just need to map through the data and display it. So let's do data.map, and it's gonna be a recipe. Let's just make it now as any, and let's return back just a bit of boilerplate that and let's just return back a bit of boilerplate that Copilot gave us. So now let's create a type for our recipe, and it's actually going to be the type that we have in our schema, and we can find it here. And if we move this a bit, then we can see that we will have an ID, description, name, description we don't, time to prepare, time to cook. We're going to have likes, dislikes, and we're also going to have a created at. And all of this are going to be strings. On top of this, we're going to have ingredients and instructions. Now that we're done with this, we can put it aside. We want our div that holds the recipe to actually have a maximum width, a fixed width of 400 pixel. We want it to display a flex. We want it to be flex call, justify between, a gap of 8, a border, padding of 4, rounded border radius a bit rounded, and we want a border purple 300. And now we can actually put this one as our recipe. Inside this, we're going to have another div, and inside this div we will have our h2, which is going to be our recipe name, and we will have a delete button. I'm using ShadCN buttons, so don't worry if you don't know about it. Just npx ShadCN add button or whatever component you want. And in order to make everything user-friendly and accessible-friendly, we're gonna make this one screen reader only, and then we're gonna use the trash trash 2 should be from Lucid React. I don't know why this isn't showing up, but it should have. On the button, we're gonna add some sensible stuff. So we want it when we actually click it to scale down a bit. Then when we hover over it, we want it to scale a bit up. We want the transition transform on it. We want to use the small variant. And on this, we want to make this container a flex row, and justify between. And now our initial thing is done. And we want to make this trash can a bit smaller, because now it's a bit big. And we also want to give to this a font serif. And we also want to make the text a bit larger. We want to make it 2XL. All right, perfect. This is our initial thing. The next part is going to be the time to cook and time to prepare. Again, we're going to have a div with a flex, justify between, item center, and we're gonna give it a minus margin top of 4. Now, we're going to have a p tag, and inside this p tag, we're going to have a span, which is going to be time to cook. And then we will have another span, which is going to be the actual value. And this ones we don't really need. And we can repeat this procedure for the time to prepare. Okay, that's perfect. Now let's actually do some stuff with this, because right now it looks awful. So again, on this one we can actually make all these fonts serif, because they're gonna be serif. Then on this p tag, let's make it flex. Let's give it a gap of 4, maybe actually a gap of 2 at this dimension, and let's capitalize the actual stuff, and then let's align the items on the center. And we can actually just copy this, because it will be the same thing. And now let's make this a bit of a text gray 500, so it doesn't really stand out so much. Perfect. And for our actual time to cook, let's give it a font size of XL. So let's make it basically 20 pixels. Perfect. Now this was the actual time to cook. Let's now map through the ingredients. Let's see which is the div. Yeah. So in this one, let's make this wrapping container. Let's give it a space y of 4. So basically between every component we're gonna have 1 rem of distance. Then let's add an h3 with the class name of text XL and the font serif. And I'm gonna give font serif in here, because I think everything that we do, it's gonna be here, ingredients. If I could spell ingredients. Perfect. And now let's open up a UL and let's do exactly this. A grid with 2 columns, because for, let's say, bigger recipes or maybe more ingredients, this list could actually get a bit big, so I don't think it's gonna look too nice. Now instructions are remaining, and let's see how we will take care of them. So the instructions are gonna be pretty much the same thing as we did here, just instead of this we will have a p tag, and then we will just recipe.instructions. And now it's starting to look a bit better. And to complete all these operations, let's actually add our like and dislike buttons. So again, pretty much the same procedure. We're gonna have a like, we're going to have a dislike button. Let's just add them like this. Both of them are gonna be ghost buttons. This will be a screen reader only. We're gonna be using the thumbs. We're gonna be using the heart. I think this one. We're gonna be using the heart icon. And in order to make it just a bit nicer, we will actually fill it with red 400. And like this, it is a bit nicer. And then we will add another span, which is gonna be the recipe likes. And on this one we can add font serif. And now that I'm typing this, I'm actually realizing that I could have made the entire thing serif, but yeah, that's text XL. And then we're gonna give it a padding left of 2, maybe just 1. Yeah. And then perfect. Now we actually want, when somebody hovers over this button, to feel this heart. So let's make this button actually a group. And then if somebody hovers over that group, let's now feel the heart. And it's a bit snappy for my liking, so let's do transition colors, so it's a bit nicer. So no matter where you hover over this will fill. And I think we could actually put this here, and it should propagate. Yeah. Okay. And let's transition colors. Perfect. We will come back to this a bit later on to add some more stuff, but for now, it's good how it is. Let's just copy this button, and this will be dislike, dislikes, and instead of this, we're gonna have a thumbs down. And we're not gonna fill this one. On this one, we're actually going to change the stroke to gray 400. And the text color is gonna be gray 400. So a bit, let's say, a bit sadder when something like this happens, when we get a dislike. Okay, as we did at the previous button, so on this one, we actually want the same sort of thing to happen on this one. So let's add them, and let's do transition all. And we can just copy this over here so we don't type it again. So when somebody clicks, then we get this nice clicky effect. Perfect. Now, one more thing we have to take care of. We actually want this to be in a sort of a grid pattern. So we need to wrap this entire thing in a div. And let's add the display to it. Grid calls 2, and then let's give it a gap of 4. And I think this is perfect. And for this one, let's give it a gap of 6. So there's a bit of spacing between this. And let's give this one a margin bottom of 4, just so that let's actually make the gap just bigger. Yeah, I think a gap of 10 looks a bit nicer. And yeah, this was the first part completed. Okay, now let's create our recipe adder .tsx. I use this shortcut tsrfce, and it basically gives me everything I need, just the skeleton. So for this, we're actually going to be using ShadCN components. Yeah, I know, what a surprise. And we're gonna be using the dialog component. So just following these instructions here. And then copying this boilerplate here, we have our component. And if we hover here, we can add all missing imports. And basically, we are done with everything. Let's start off the dev environment again. And let's import our component. And now we can have a nice dialog for it. Perfect. Now, let's do some stuff with the trigger. So the first thing that we're actually going to do is we're gonna give it a BG of black. We're gonna make the text white. Then we're gonna give it a padding of 2, and then we're gonna overwrite the bit and give it a padding on the sides a bit bigger, and then we're gonna make it a bit rounded, just like this. Perfect. Now let's do the same thing with the content. Let's give it a font serif. Let's give it a padding of 10, and inside here, this is where our form is going to live. So for the form, whenever I have multiple inputs that pretty much do the same thing, so in order for me not to repeat myself too much, then I just create a form component, and it's an array with multiple elements. And if Copilot is marked, it already knew. Instead of this, we want this to be text area. Perfect. Now you know the drill. ShadCN add input text area. Yeah, as easy as that. pm dev, and now inside this content, we don't need anything from this. We just need to map the form field, and then we actually do need this, and then we need to do a switch statement field type. If the type is input, almost got it right. So we're gonna be using label. I forgot to add the label. Perfect. Now let's import the label. Let's import text area. Let's import the label again. And let's use our input. And now when we open this, we will have a nice and ready to go form. One more thing is missing inside this. We actually need to open a form and let's do this and let's add a submit button. Add recipe, and now we have a nice and good to go form. And it would make it a bit nicer if we actually give it some space between it, maybe 6, I think, a bit more space to breathe. And let's change the placeholder for this ingredients and say this: add your ingredients with space with a new line for each one. Perfect. All right, now that we have all this stuff, which is quite good, unfortunately they're still not doing anything. So for this, let's actually create our mutation. Is use mutation from Tensta query, and then let's create our mutation function. It's async recipe, and then we basically send the recipe on our thing. But before we do this, we actually need to handle the submit, and we're gonna be doing the handling with Zod. So let's do pm install Zod. Zod is a validation library that's gonna help us validate our form data. Some validation is already gonna be built in, basically with this is a number type, so basically we wouldn't be able to add this, but apparently we are, so yeah, that's why we need validation. All right, Zod works in this manner. So we're gonna import the Z from Zod, and then we need to create our recipe schema. So our recipe schema is this. Ingredients are actually an z.array of z.string. Other than that, Copilot pretty much guessed everything. Now let's do our handle submit function. And the event is actually going to be a HTML form event. To begin with, let's, like always, prevent the default. So we don't want this. We don't want when we click on submit to refresh the page. So this is what happens now. This is the default const form data is new form data and event current target. Then let's get the time to cook, and we need to coerce it into being a number. Then let's do time to prepare, and let's do the ingredients, and again we're gonna make this ingredients as an array. So now we pretty much have almost all of our data in the right format. Now let's const data equals this, and let's do our try catch block. For now we're just gonna console log the error, and now the recipe schema dot parse data. And now if we look at our parsed data, if we have no errors, of course, so chicken, time to prepare 0, time to cook 11 minutes, something else, just cook it, and let's add the on submit handle submit. And if we actually console log this, then we can see our object with ingredients, instructions, name, time to cook, time to prepare. And we want to send this parsed data in our mutation function, but our mutation function accepts a recipe, and because we didn't give it any sort of type, then that recipe, it's going to be type void. So how do we fix that? So we fix that by doing this. We basically infer from Zod the type of recipe schema, and now our recipe body, it's the correct format. And now TypeScript is happy as well. And if everything went right, then now when we actually click this, we should have our chicken. But as you saw, the page is not refreshing, and the modal is not closing. This is because the modal right now is an uncontrolled element, and because of this, we actually need to use useState. Is open, set is open, and it's useState, and it's false. Now, in the dialog, we need to do open is open, on open change set is open. The dialog trigger again should on click set is open to true. And then when we actually finish sending this thing, we want to set, actually we want to do a finally, because it doesn't matter if it's an error or not. We want this set is open to trigger. So we want the modal to close, basically. Let's remove this console logs and all this unnecessary stuff. And now if we do a add recipe, even though we didn't really send anything, this thing closed. But this was a bit of a problem because we actually sent the data. So we don't want to send the data if we don't have any stuff. All right, let's switch this recipe schema save parse, and let's change a bit our behavior. So if parse data dot success, just then we want to do that. If it's not a success, then we just need to console log the parse data, and like that the object is still success true, and now it's opening correctly and closing correctly. Perfect. Okay, now we have had to change a bit the way we handled it. The way I handled this before, I was basically overriding the entire form data and all the actions, and because of that I wasn't actually validating the data because I was actually sending correct data even though there was no data, so I was somehow circumventing Zod. And now we can click on add recipe, and nothing is going to happen. And we could actually show an error and stuff like this, but it's beside the point today. So when everything is good, then we're gonna set is open to false, and like that we're gonna be closing the dialog. And now one more thing that we have to do, we want to invalidate our recipe schema, our recipes query, when we are adding a new recipe. So on success, we actually want to invalidate all the recipes. So basically, in easier terms, we just want to refetch all the recipes. So the new recipe is going to show up correctly here. So if we say here soup, then time to prepare 200, 100, some things, just cook. And now you're going to see our soup, it's added here from the get-go. And we can change this open trigger to actually be add recipe. Perfect. Now let's go back to our app and see how we can actually make these buttons do something. This is going to be pretty simple. So we're going to have a const like mutation, and it's going to be a use mutation. And again, we need to use query client here as well. And we need to import use mutation, and the query key it's actually recipes. And now whenever a user clicks on the button, we're gonna go like mutation.mutate recipe ID. So now on this thing, when we click on it, or it should have happened, let's see, was not working, we get a 404 API recipes 12 like 404 not found. Okay, this is interesting, a bit of debugging. The method was wrong, because I think in our API we actually have this as a patch. Yeah, recipes, recipe ID, and like. And now this should have worked, but it doesn't. Let's do a bit of debugging. Okay, the fix was quite simple. And now whenever we click on this, the likes are gonna increment, and we can just copy this one over and do a dislike mutation, and we can modify this to be dislikes. And again, if we do here on click, dislike mutation, and now we have the same sort of behavior. Now let's make a bit this fill buttons a bit nicer, a bit more interactive, because right now they're a bit bland. So let's import CN, and let's do this. If our recipe dot likes is greater than 0 but less than 5 but less than 3, let's fill it with 300. Let's fill it with 400 if it's greater, if it's less than 7, and let's fill it with 600 if it's greater than 7. Let's modify this, and we can basically use the same sort of thing in here as well, but instead of red, first we're gonna change it to stroke, and then we're gonna change it to gray. So the less likes it has, then the bigger the stroke will be. Perfect. Now we have all this stuff in place. This is working, it's looking nice. Let's add sorting in our app. Now let's figure out what exactly are we gonna sort by. So we're gonna be sorting by the following. So we want to sort from time to cook, time to prepare, we want to sort by name, and we want to sort by created at ascending and created at descending. Now that we have this, let's create a state for this. And let's import sort by. And because we actually want to use query params for this, then we could actually do the following. We get the query params from the window location search object, and then instead of giving it a default, we're gonna be giving it params.get sort by as sort by. So if there's something in our query params, then that's gonna be the state. If not, then we're gonna be using something else. If not, it's gonna be by the newest. Okay, let's do our sorting component. And our sorting component is going to be composed of the following. We know this is going to receive sort by. We know it's going to have this set sort by, but it's actually going to be a React dispatch set state action. And it's going to have another function that we will create, set query params, which is going to take a value and it's going to take a key and it's going to return void. And now in here, let's do our sort by, and set query params. And we're going to be using another ShadCN component, and that one is going to be the popover. Let's wait for it to install and then start again our dev server. And it's going to be a control component. Let's do a sort map, which is basically going to take our sort by dot. We actually need to import the sort by. It's gonna be exactly this, because we actually want to display not this value, we want to display this value when the user selects sort. And then here, let's go again to ShadCN components and let's pick the popover example. And again, add all missing imports. And let's add our sorting component and let's pass it sort by set sort by, and for now this is all that's gonna take. And now we have a nice popover. The actual trigger is just gonna on click, it's just gonna set is open to not is open. So we want this functionality to work. And then the content, we want to give it a max width of 36. Position absolute, we want to give it minus left 8 and font serif. And inside the content, const sort options, we will want to return this sort options here. So time to cook, time to prepare, but instead of them being divs, we want to make them buttons. We want to give them the variant of link. And for this, we want to give it newest and oldest. And now we have all our components working nicely. And let's make this maximum width of 40. And right now it has a bit more space to breathe. And these are our sort options. And now all that we actually need to do is create the set query params function. And it will work the opposite way. Perfect. Function set query params is going to take a value and a key, and it's going to do the following. Const params is this. We're going to set the key and the value. If not value, then we want to delete the actual state. And if there is a value, Then we want to set the key and the value, and we want to push the state. And now, if we do here, we can see the URL changing. Now, one more thing remaining, the trigger. We actually do want to make it serif. And in here, after it, we want to add a span, and we want to see the sort by. But we actually want to see the sort by the map. So sort map. And we want to see it by sort by. And we want to capitalize the letters, and of course we want to give it a font serif. And let's give this a padding left of 4, and let's do this self start. Actually, we can do this self start, and now we have our zucchini component, and let's see what's happening here. And I think here we can actually give this a max width of 700 pixels. Let's see a bit. A max width of 800 pixels. And then, because we're using width like this, we can give it a margin of auto, and now we have it in the middle. Now the only thing that's left for us to actually do is see why this is open is not triggering, which it should have. Set is open to false, and of course we actually need to do this. So now we have name, time to prepare, newest, and oldest, and we can see the sort by in the URL is changing. So all that we have to do now is, before this, we want to sort it by time to cook, and then it's going to be time to cook minus b time to prepare by name, created that, and created that descendant. So we know our newest one. I think this ones they got themselves mixed up, so it should be B and A and B. And zucchini soup is my oldest one, and my newest one is this one. Time to cook, first one is 1 minute, and then last one is 100 minutes, so that's correct. So now we can see that everything is working as expected. Now let's also add the search functionality, which is going to be probably the simple one. And then it's just going to be a label with search, and then we're going to be using the input and a class of sans serif. This one, it's actually going to be a flex row, and justify between, and we're going to give it the width of full. And then this one is just going to be a flex, and we're going to align them on the center and give it a gap of 4. And we're actually going to make the text large, like this. Maybe just base. Yeah, I think base should work fine. Perfect. Let's create our search state. And again, we're going to be getting this search from the actual state. And the value is going to be search. And we're going to be setting the query params as search. So when we type something here, it's going to show up. When we remove, it's going to go away. Perfect. And now, before our mapping, we're going to add a filter, and then we're gonna filter by recipe name, and we're gonna filter by recipe.ingredients, and we could, no, we couldn't. So if, let's say, I know we put pasta on stuff, there is a D somewhere, and I think in order for this to actually work even better, recipe name so we want to get the ingredients, but we actually don't really care if we get them. So we need to use some, because we want this to not be case sensitive. So when we type in pasta, it should show up. Perfect. And now we have pretty much all the functionality that we need. And the only thing that we actually do have pending is the delete, and afterwards is the actual animations. So let's start off with the delete mutation. And again, this is going to be really simple. We just create a mutation function. It's going to be a async request to our API URL on the recipe ID. Method is delete. We're going to await the response.json. When we get the response back and it's successful, then we're going to invalidate the queries. And then in here, next to the name, we have this button, and then on click, delete mutation, mutate recipe.id. And now let's try it out to this something, and it got deleted. But maybe some people like this snappiness. I personally sort by. I personally would much rather prefer to have some sort of animations, and that's why we're gonna be using my favorite animation library, which is Framer Motion. Framer Motion is absolutely awesome at making animation such an easy job. So in order to use it, we just need to import motion and animate presence from Framer Motion. And I imported the right ones, and now on our main div, we're gonna be doing this. Then initial, you see how they drop like this now, and I actually do quite like it. And then on the exit, it's gonna go a bit up and then it's gonna disappear. And transition, actually the default setting is quite alright. And now above, right above this one, so right above our data, we need to do animate presence, and below our mapping, in order for us to have this working on exit as well. So now when something gets deleted, we have a nice animation. And this stuff happens even when we filter, but it doesn't happen when we sort. Alright, so this video took a lot longer than I expected it to take, and if I bored you, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it. I hope you had fun as well. I hope you learned something. And this is pretty much a full stack app. You have control over the database, you have control over everything. So if you got so far, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you want to see next. It helps me out a lot. Thank you, and bye.